Joining me today on the More Than Your Age podcast is the woman who is taking the Instagram social media algorithm by storm and causing all types of disruptions and controversy in the world of education, and the host of the Homeschool Hug podcast, Sarah Wehkamp. Welcome to the More Than Your Age podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you, Sarah. So I don't know if you remember this, but you are an acquaintance or friend with my friend Marianne, and she had shared, I think, right when you just started your podcast, because I know it's fairly recent, she had shared something, and I thought, ooh, I'm interested in learning more. And so I found your page. I loved it. And then, like I said in the little mini intro, it is taking the internet by storm. But before we get to all of that, because I do find it very fascinating and interesting, I want to talk a little bit about you. You grew up in public school, as well as your husband. Your mom worked in public schools. You shared with me that your grandma was the national PTA president. By national, do you mean like United States national?
Yes. Yes. Like we are deep in. Yes.
Okay. I saw that and I was like, wow, that's very impressive.
She was a very impressive lady. Yes.
Okay. So you've got school, public education all up in your blood. Your plan, before you became a teacher, your plan was to go to law school, but you didn't. And instead you packed up your bags and you moved to Spain. So why did you say no to law? Why Spain? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so when I graduated, my plan was to go to law school, like you said. And thankfully, I first ended up working at a law firm before starting law school. And while I was working there, I realized that the idea that I had in my head of what I thought it was going to be like to be a lawyer was completely different than what it was like on the ground. And so as I was working there, I slowly realized, oh my gosh, this isn't actually what I want to do, which was really discouraging, because I don't know if you know that feeling when you've worked so hard for something and you really think you want it, and then you get there and you're like, oh, this isn't at all what I thought it was going to be. And then I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do. And I was randomly on my lunch break one day at the law firm, and I think it was an ad, just popped up and was like, hey, want to get your teaching certification? And I thought, yes, I do. That sounds amazing. I want to do that. And it just happened to be in Spain. And I thought, well, I've learned some Spanish in college and in high school, and I love Europe. And so why not? Let's try this, because I had no other plan. And so I told the school that I wasn't going to be coming, and I quit my job at the law firm, and I packed my bags and took off for Madrid, Spain.
When you told your family that you were not going to pursue law school and instead, adios, I'm off to the beautiful country of Spain, what did they say?
They were oddly super supportive. I think that they could sense in me how excited I was about it. And, they probably looked at me and thought, she's still young. And what a better road and decision now, finding out you don't want to spend all this time and money going to law school and doing this job you don't want to do. And I think they could tell that I was passionate and excited about this. And my mom actually flew over with me and got me settled in and dropped off. And I will say, as excited as I was and as confident as I felt before I got over there, I remember the exact moment when I said goodbye to my mom. We were standing beside the rental car out on the street, and she was leaving for the airport. And I just dissolved into tears. I was just like, what? It just hit me all of a sudden. Like, what am I doing? I didn't know anyone there. I didn't have a job. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to find a job. And I just remember telling her, like, please take me back with you. Like, I will grab a bag and get in the car. Like, this was a terrible idea. And to her credit, she was like, no, like, I know good things are here for you, and this is going to be a great experience, and just give it a little bit of time. And we hugged, and she left. And she was right. After 1 month, I was getting my certification to be a teacher, meeting friends, loving the Spanish culture, and feeling completely comfortable and confident in my choice to move there.
Wow. Okay. So what I find interesting, I guess I was under the impression that the ad that you saw to get your teaching certification over in Spain also had the job that came along with it, but it didn't.
It did not. No. So it was just the certification, and they would assist you afterwards after you got it. But I didn't know what assist meant. That could mean anything from just like give you a pamphlet with some places you could call to actual, career assistance. But yeah, no, I had no job. I just had the dream to get the certification.
Wow, man, that's very scary.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I went over to Spain, but I was doing school. I mean, you were doing school too, but I kind of, like that was just kind of it. That's what you were doing. So
Yeah.
when you completed from I guess the start of the certification program through completion and finding a job, how long were you there?
Well, the certification program was about 2.5, 3 months. And during that time, I did start looking for jobs and was able to find jobs and able to find an apartment and, had friends by that point that I was able to move in with other people from the program. And I ended up staying and living there for 2 years. Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. And I probably would have stayed longer if I could have.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you're there 2 years and your certification at that time, what was it in?
It was a TEFL certification, so teaching
Okay.
English as a foreign language.
Okay, perfect. And then while you're there, you're learning Spanish. Were you able to gain fluency through those 2 years, or were you around a lot of English speakers as well?
Yes, I was able to gain fluency. So all of my students and most of the businesses that I interacted with and employers and, going out to eat and boyfriends are a great way to learn very quickly. It's the best way to learn Spanish. So, yeah, I became completely fluent in Spanish. And I find that really ironic. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this as well, but I took, 4 years in high school of Spanish and another 4 in college. And I really didn't learn the language until I lived there and fully immersed myself and used it every day. It was the best way to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you're 2 years there in Madrid, and then you come back at some point, and you also, I know that you taught across 5 countries, 3 continents. So I kind of want to know too how, briefly kind of how did those unfold? And I guess you got that buzz or that itch when you were in Spain, because it'll do that to you.
It will absolutely do that to you. Yes. It was, yeah, it just kind of caught fire. I fell in love with teaching, and I fell in love with learning about how different places view education and educate. And so when I got home, I got plugged in with the Rotary Club, the local Rotary Club of all places, and they were looking for a teacher to go and teach in Mexico. And so I actually went and taught in Mexico, which was crazy. This was during Hurricane Emily, and I remember I was like, am I coming back home? Are you bringing me? And they were like, no, it'll be fine. And so I just hunkered down with my host family, and I'll never forget, they brought in the dolphins that they have like close to the coast that people can, like ride and swim with or whatever, and put them in the pool of my host family. So they were just swimming around in the pool. Hurricane Emily was going on, and I was like, this is nuts. What is happening? I look back on that now, and I'm like, what a crazy adventure. And that teaching experience changed dramatically because the next day, my students were all people who were in the tourist industry, and their shops and everything had been just destroyed. I mean, there were trees everywhere. People couldn't get gasoline. And so we shifted over into more of a service and cleanup more than teaching. But it was an amazing experience, and that made me want to teach abroad yet again. The next time, I believe, was in Turkey. After my husband and I got married, we immediately, well, first I taught stateside. Then we got married and I went and taught in Turkey together, and I was in a bilingual second grade classroom there. Also fascinating how they approach education and living there and meeting a bunch of expats and hanging out. I really have a passion for education and seeing how it's done differently, what works, what doesn't, meeting new people, traveling. It's kind of just an amazing experience to be able to have, I think, especially when you're young and before having kids, and kind of seeing what you may want to do or not do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said that in Turkey, just the way that they did education was very fascinating, interesting. I'm curious to know a little bit about some of that you learned that either you liked or you thought, oh, I don't know if I would do,
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because most all the classrooms I've been in have been bilingual classrooms. And so it's also been interesting to see how different classrooms approach having their kids be bilingual. And so in the classroom that I was in, we were co-teaching. And so I had a Turkish teaching partner, and she would teach in Turkish and I would teach in English. And it was a beautiful way to do that. I've seen that done in a lot of other ways that I could talk about for hours, that I have seen to be very discouraging for kids trying to learn two languages. But this one worked really, really well. And I liked the partnership because you also get the kids exposed to two different cultures. And it was a very supportive community. The parents were very involved. I think that's always really helpful and nice to see. They would come up and participate in speeches, talk about their jobs, come up and volunteer. I think the parental involvement there was really important and really, really interesting. Turkey is an interesting place to teach because the Ministry of Education there is very different than it is here. There are a lot more practices that I found to be very different than what we do, as far down to like having to I remember that when the ministry would come to do an inspection, we would have to change out the maps and the globes because there were arguments over what was Turkey and what was Cyprus, what were different, and so you would have to like switch out. It was fascinating. It was very interesting. So, but there was a level of like deception there that I was like, "Ooh, this is a little weird." But yeah, they also had in Turkey, in this school particular that I was in, an emphasis on project-based learning, which the kids loved and I loved as well. So you would start with a problem, or you would start with something that you were trying to figure out, and then the learning would fall under that. So what do we need in order to be able to do this thing, whatever it is? Set up a lemonade stand. We have to get the recipe. We have to do the math. We have to figure out, how much we need. We have to do the advertising campaign. So we have to learn how to write these words. But they would get excited about it because it was all around this project and this one or a question that they wanted to answer. We have a question about, sea life or whatever. And then we would make the lessons and all the learning around that. And I think that helps preserve their love of learning and their curiosity. And really, I could see them being so much more engaged than in other places that I've taught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen, too, how project-based learning in the classroom can be highly effective because, like you said, you can get all different aspects, and it's really helpful and beneficial for the kids. So you're teaching in Turkey and you're married at this time, and then you and your husband, you move back to the States, and then you get a job teaching in the public schools here in the States. And so at this time when you're, back in the States, what were your long-term goals for education at that specific time?
Well, it kind of depended. I had known that I always wanted to have children, and I always felt like I thought I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so what I thought was maybe going to happen is that it would take us a while to have kids, and maybe I would still teach and have little ones, or I would have little ones and then go back to teaching. I absolutely loved teaching, and so I could see a lot of ways forward with what I thought would happen with my career in education, and none of those happened. Not a single one of them. Not choice A, not choice B, not choice C.
So what was
Mm-hmm.
So you thought, okay, maybe I would stay home, maybe I would teach a little bit. So when you did teach in the public schools, how long were you teaching until you did have your kids?
So when I taught in the States before we moved to Turkey, I taught for 6 years stateside, and then Turkey. And then when we came back, I started teaching again. I was in a third grade bilingual classroom. And I remember telling my husband, I think we should start trying because I think it's going to take us a while before we have kids. And he was like, okay. And in my first year back, in my first year teaching, we immediately got pregnant with twins.
Oh.
And so that changed everything because I think if it had been one kid, maybe I would have gone back to teaching. But with it being two, the math just didn't math. I was like, there's no way, this doesn't make sense. And so I decided at the end of that year, to resign from teaching at that school for that time. And I was home a bit with my kiddos. We had a third kiddo. And then I did end up going back to teaching, and I taught at the high school level. I taught Spanish at the high school. And then COVID happened and the world shut down and things changed dramatically. And so I ended up back home again. And I could have predicted absolutely none of that.
So, okay, twins and then a third one, and teaching elementary compared to teaching high school is vastly different. They're
Vastly
and bilingual. Yeah. And even though like you have bilingual and then you're teaching Spanish, also very different.
Yes.
And I'm curious to know too, when you're really before COVID happened, when you're, A, B, and C didn't happen for your plan. And so, okay, we're on D and then eventually E and F. And you, public school, PTA grandma president, she's, running everything like that. What were your thoughts on homeschooling?
So I had always respected homeschooling. I'd always been open to homeschooling. I'd always been curious about homeschooling. In fact, there were times when our kids would be home from spring break from the Montessori school that they would go to, and I would say, let's just try it. Like, let's just try homeschooling and test it for a week and see what it's like. And same during, the lockdowns, there was school at home, and I thought, oh, this is what homeschooling is. We can kind of dip our toe into this. I never thought we would homeschool. I thought that public school was the gold standard. It was all I knew. It was all my husband knew. And I just couldn't figure out how it would actually work. I had so many questions, so many doubts, so many fears. I could see it working for other people. I had heard that it was good, but I think I just didn't believe that it could work for our family.
So you didn't think it could work for your family, saw that other people did it, great, not opposed to it completely, but just thought, public school was the standard. That's kind of the way to go. So what changed in your life to say, no, actually, we are going to homeschool and our life is going to be completely different?
A couple of things changed. I know for a lot of people, they said when COVID happened and they saw school back at home and saw what was going on, they decided not to go back. And that was not the case for us. We saw it and we still went back. It wasn't for me until I taught at the high school and I had this sort of image or foreshadowing of where all this was headed with our kids that really gave me pause. Because the high school that I taught at is a good high school. It's a great high school by almost any metric. But the kids there were miserable. They were stressed out. They had a ton of anxiety. They were asking to eat lunch in my classroom because they were being bullied or peer pressured or just miserable being out in the lunchroom. Some of the things I was asked to do as a teacher, some of the learning that was going on, some of the things that were allowed, some of the things I saw, I could just kind of see where all this was headed with our kids. I think the grades K1 and 2 can just be very sweet. There's not a whole lot that people take issue with in K1 and 2. But as you start to move through the grades, I think I just thought this is not actually where we want this to go. And also, as simultaneously that was happening and I was seeing that, I was seeing both my husband and I both and our own kids, they were losing their love of learning. They were losing their curiosity. They were losing their drive, their interest, their joy. They didn't necessarily not want to go to school, but they were just super meh about it. The social situations were deteriorating. And I just thought, you know what? I think that there has to be a better way. And on a very personal note, simultaneously also, we had just gotten everyone into school. We had just gotten the youngest into school full time. And having twins and then having another child was a lot for me. And I definitely lost myself in motherhood. There was a period there where there was a lot of tears, there was a lot of yelling, there was a lot of me trying to find my personhood in the midst of motherhood. And I did not feel like I was strong enough or capable enough to be able to bring them all back home and not lose myself completely. Yeah. But during this time, when they were all in school, I did start to get a good footing, a good grounding in boundaries, in who I am, in more healthy ways to interact and be. And that felt like an encouragement and a nod of like, okay, you can do this now. This is not going to be all of that all over again, but with school on top of it, I was able to give myself permission to operate in different ways that opened up the door for us to be able to do homeschooling and to help me to feel like I could do it.
How were you able to realize or recognize that you could create a space for you to have your own personhood and to not get just sucked away as, like you said, there was the struggle beforehand of getting lost in motherhood, and which is wonderful and amazing, but that does happen.
Yeah. That's a really, really good question. One of the things that helped me was I realized that I was modeling for my kids that I didn't matter and that I didn't need to take care of myself. And I fast forwarded to them being parents, and I thought, and even though they're all boys, I think it would be even more powerful if it was all girls, but thinking I don't want to model for them that you have to put your kids first, above yourself, above your marriage, above everything else. And for them to then have to go through this exact same thing, because it's not healthy and it's not necessary. And thinking about what I wanted to model for them was a game changer and a mindset shift for me, because I also didn't want them to think back on their childhood and think, oh my gosh, like mom was miserable all the time and she didn't enjoy being around us. And I had to deal with a lot of mom guilt. That was also a big shift for me too. And dealing with those two things together, feeling like I wanted to be able to model for my kids what I wanted them to be able to do for themselves when they were parents, and dealing with the mom guilt were, I think, the two biggest game changers for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see that. When you were able also to recognize, okay, I don't, dealing with the mom guilt, let's put that aside. Let me show them that I love my kids and I love what I'm doing, but I can also have the things that I enjoy and the things that I want to do. So when you were able to recognize that, did you like how soon did you know what you wanted to do specifically, or was that just, okay, I'm going to figure that out as time progresses?
I knew immediately that I wanted to go horseback riding. That was one of the things that I knew immediately. It was something I enjoyed as a kid that I had put off, that I hadn't done, because it's a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit more of a time commitment. There could be safety concerns. And I just knew immediately I have to get on a horse. I have to go riding. So I got back into horseback riding lessons. And that was the start of the snowball of, now I'm going to paint, and now I'm going to do, I literally did basket weaving. I did it all. And it was so much fun and so great to be able to have the experiential knowledge that me taking time to do these things is actually beneficial to my family. It is actually making things smoother, more calm, more peaceful. I feel more settled, more grounded. It was contagious. You could see it flow throughout the mood and the vibe of the whole house. And that gave me the confidence to keep trying and doing more things and making it more of a weekly thing rather than just like, once every 3 months or something.
Yeah. Did you make the decision for horseback riding after you had already started homeschooling, or was that decision made before you kind of officially pulled the plug?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah, I started doing it before. And even some of the painting and different things, I started doing that before. And then we made the decision to homeschool.
Okay. So you're already weaving this into your lifestyle, knowing that you just want to make sure that you are your own person. And because you had these 20 years of experience in education that looked different in a bunch of different ways, but it was still a big part of your identity. And then there's the mom thing that we were talking about. Was it at all challenging, even though you knew the reason why you decided to leave and the whole point behind it for your children? Was there still moments where you struggled with the identity of, oh my gosh, I'm no longer a teacher, public school teacher?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was the teacher in every room that I was in. It was every conversation. It was who I was. And it's not often talked about like this in a venue like here. If I was alone with another teacher, maybe, but it's really hard to leave teaching. And it's really hard to leave teaching and then to say anything negative or honest or possibly disparaging about it. And so, yes, there was a lot of feeling kind of ostracized a little bit. There was a lot of grief around that this couldn't work because I wanted it to work so badly, and I thought that it was going to be the answer for our family. And so, yes, it was awkward. It's weird navigating. You still have those friends, you have your teacher friends who are still there. You have the teachers of your kids that you love and adore that are still there. They're still in the neighborhood, like they live down the street, some of them. And so, yes, it was very weird. And trying to, carve out a new identity after that was hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, that's a lot of years. And then, like you said, your whole life, your whole community, your neighborhood, you've got family, friends, family, and everything. When y'all made the decision and then you started telling the people in your life that you trust, and even, others as well, I'm sure you got a lot of different responses. And I'm sure some of the responses were not as positive as you would have liked. How was that for you?
I kind of equate it to, do you remember being a new mom or like announcing you're pregnant and then suddenly everyone has an opinion? Yes. It's very similar to that. And some are very direct about their opinions. Some were a lot more subtle / passive aggressive. A lot of people, they're coming at it from a place of worry. They want to make sure we're okay. They want to make sure that the kids are okay. A lot of people come at it from a perspective of just not knowing. Just there's a knowledge gap there of what this actually is. Some are just confused. And so, yes, we had a wide range of opinions. One thing that my husband and I were very intentional on doing was knowing we were going to get a wide range of opinions, we made this decision with our kids without any outside opinions or input. So basically, we didn't tell anybody that we were thinking about doing this, except for maybe 2 people that we really trusted. And otherwise, we just let people know the decision after it had been made and told them, if you have questions, if you want to engage in a good faith discussion about this, we can talk about this. We're not going to argue about it. We're not going to yell about it. We're not going to get defensive about it. We will answer questions. And then, we just had to decide whose voice mattered most. And that was my husband and I's and then our kids. And the rest of it, we just had to make a decision also that we didn't have to convince everybody or anybody. And that was a big weight off. Because I think when I started, I really wanted to convince people. I felt like I wanted to convince them, especially my teacher friends and people that were going to, obviously stay in public school. And when I realized I don't actually have to do that, it was a lot of relief.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it's very freeing. And I really like, too, that you made the decision to come up to decide as a family first. And like you said, maybe 1 or 2, but you didn't invite a lot of opinions. That's an easy mistake. I'm very guilty of that. So that's I feel like that's a really good takeaway too. And I know, and forgive me, I don't remember which podcast episode it was, but I know you had an episode, maybe one of the first few, where you did talk about how you do bring up this information to the people in your life if you do decide to make that decision to homeschool. And I had a lot of good takeaways with that. So I just wanted to tell you, thank you for that. It was really good. So as I mentioned, you have this podcast, you decided to stay home or to homeschool, and you share online and on your podcast as well that you were lost at the beginning. You didn't know anybody who was doing it and you just had to figure everything out. And your goal is to help people. You're very helpful with it. And you provide a lot of really good tips and information. And you also started this Instagram page that has, I love it. It's been very controversial.
It has. Who knew?
And what's fascinating too is that the ones that get the most engagement, and I mean, I was doing a little follow up on that just to kind of talk about some of the ones that have really been viral. And I want to share some of them because there are certain topics that people ask or think about. And I think you do a good job too. You're not completely knocking public education. You say this is for every family. Mm-hmm. It's your decision. And if I remember, I have a question with that too, but I want to get to kind of some of the statements that you had. So I'm going to share just, I think about 3 that I have that, with the audience that has caused a lot of controversy.
Okay.
And just want to have you kind of share some of your thoughts on the stances.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the videos, which has 2.1 million views of you cutting a potato that people have a lot to say with it. We can talk about that too. That's a side note. So this is what you say on it. You say, one day you're feeling good about report cards. The next day you're finding out they don't know their multiplication facts or what a noun is. The second one that I'm going to read to you, it has 12.2 million views. It's you cutting carrots with a spatula.
Yes.
It says,
normal.
it says, one day your kid is excited about space. The next day they ask their teacher, why does the moon change shape? And they're told, don't worry about that. It's not on the test. Everyone can relate to that. The third one I want to share has 3.7 million views. I can't remember what you're doing. I didn't write it down. One day you think school is great for socialization. The next you're emailing the teacher requesting that your child not be seated by these 6 kids anymore. So these are areas that a lot of people talk about. I'd love to have you just share a little bit of what you want to based on any of the 3 or all of them.
In regard to like the specific things I'm talking about in the reels, or in regard to the reactions?
The specific things that you're talking to. Like, I'll go back to you're feeling good about report cards, and the next day you're finding out your kids don't know their multiplication facts. And someone could say, my kids know their multiplication facts. That's not the point you're making. So
Yeah.
feel free to share.
This one was shocking to me because I was an involved parent. I was a teacher. I was up there volunteer. I was the room mom for my twins' 5th grade class. And people will reply to me and say, if you were that involved, how did you not know? And my response is, isn't that exactly the point? Like, that's how indicative it is of how bad this issue is, because we were given so many false assurances about where our kids were academically. And if you look at the amount of paperwork and grades and tests and things that the kids bring home, you are trusting that the teachers are grading those appropriately for what they know. You are trusting that there is not cheating going on. And yeah, I'm going to go here. I don't think that I realized that this was happening on an elementary school level where there were false assurances being given about grades. I, however, maybe should have, because when I taught in high school, I was not allowed to fail a student. And so I myself was giving the false assurances about the grades. And so whether a kid cheated, whether they didn't turn in the material, whether they didn't know it at all, when I turned in my first round of grades for the progress reports, the vice principal came down to my door and knocked and came in and shut the door behind her and said, you have, 30 kids failing. And I said, I know. And she said, you can't fail them. And I said, but they're failing. They don't know the material. This is Spanish 1. They can't go to Spanish 2 without, I'm not going to lie to them. Yeah, but you can't fail them. And I just remember feeling so sad for the students around that. Like, they deserve better. They can handle the truth. They deserve to know where they are. They deserve feedback. They deserve care. They deserve somebody helping them to learn this material and master this material and get the truth about where they are, especially high schoolers. And so to have this happen with my own kids was shocking to me. How much had been covered up by grades and report cards that were just lies.
Yeah. Well, and the unfortunate thing too is that you said, they can handle the truth with that, but then they know if I don't try, I'm going to pass anyway. And so they're really not learning at all.
Exactly.
And I'll maybe get to one of the other ones. When you saw this happening in the schools and you and your husband decided, okay, we are going to pull the kids. When you discussed this with your oldest, your twins, how did they respond initially?
We were very careful about how we presented this to them. And they first responded, I think, how most any kid would, which was confusion, really, because even us included had no idea of what homeschooling really was or looked like. And I think they immediately thought it would just be school at home and just me with them the whole time, doing all the stuff they were doing at school except at home. So they were definitely confused. But they were also curious about what is this going to look like. I remember when we took them to an open house at Barefoot University, And they were so excited. They were like, this, we can do this. This is homeschooling, out here in the forest and learning and moving logs around. And they just absolutely loved it. And so when we talked about it with them, after we informed them and got some more information and gave them some experiences, we all sat down and we basically did a pro and con chart. We all voted. We had multiple discussions about it, them knowing the whole time that their dad and I were going to make the final decision, but wanting their input along the way. So I would say at first they were confused, and then they started to get cautiously excited.
Yeah. What grade are they in now?
They are in 8th grade, and the youngest is in 4th grade.
Okay. And so the question that you probably get all the time that you did, we alluded to in one of the videos you had, was that you think school is great for socialization. The next thing you're emailing your teachers. And that's a lot of the big question that people ask all the time is socialization, especially middle school. Or what about all these activities, the extracurricular things and sports and fine arts and, all the things. And, that's a big deal, but a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of opportunity. And I'd love to have you just kind of share a little bit about what you've figured out in your rhythm that's kind of helped your kids and you as well.
Yeah. I mean, again, I thought the same thing, that public school was the gold standard for all these things. And questions I asked myself were, is there a way they can do theater? What about school dances? I questioned, if you don't see a kid, because this was my experience. I saw my friends every single day. If you don't see them every single day, can you make those and have those deep friendships, And one of the biggest surprises for me about homeschooling has been the socialization piece and how amazingly wonderful it has been. Our kids I and my kids are more social now than we ever were when they were in public school. And what I love about it is it's intentional. And so if there's a group, if there's something we do and it's not quite the right vibe, which this has happened before, we don't keep doing it. We go find something else. We do something different. We've created our own group. I have a mom's group that we go to, and we just got a bunch of moms together and we were like, we're going to do this. I think that to think that you're with a lot of kids for a long time equals good socialization is just not true. It's a myth. And once you get on the other side of it and you see how these relationships can bloom in a natural, healthy way where other people are guiding what's going on, adults are guiding what's going on and helping, it's just phenomenal. And you can find anything you want. Theater. My kids are in theater. They make movies with their friends. One of them is in a band. Whatever you're looking for absolutely exists in homeschooling. Sports as well. They've done football. They've done baseball. They've done golf. They've done tennis. You name it, and it is out there. And that's partially because homeschooling has grown so much that it's just booming across the board. And not everything we do is only homeschool related. In fact, I think only the co-op is only homeschool. Everything else is open to whoever. So we just find, instead of it being these kids are your same age, they were born the same year as you, and that's why we're going to group you together, the things that we do are based on, we like hanging out with you, or we share a common interest, or we want to do this cool thing together, and that's what motivates the friendships. And I would say, too, there's a difference between, I know when I was in high school and middle school, I did my best to fit in. I didn't want to be bullied. I flew under the radar. I changed a lot about who I was so that I could fit in. And what I love about what our kids have is they don't feel like they have to fit in. They have actual belonging. Like the things that they're doing and the people that they're around, they feel like they belong, which is so much better than frantically trying to fit in and change who you are. And our 8th graders are happy. They're calm. They're well-adjusted. They like talking to us. Their friends like talking to us. I did not see that coming. I mean, I thought, well, middle school is middle school no matter what. There's going to be awkward. They're going to be angry. And they're not. They're just really happy guys. And it's so cool to see. And when we drive some of their public school friends around sometimes to different things, they will ask me, like, can you please talk to my mom about homeschooling? Like, wow. I want to homeschool. I've had this request several times, and I find it really interesting.
Yeah, it's. I thank you for sharing all of that, because I think, if anyone's listening and they are toying with the idea, it's so important to realize that. And like you said, it has changed so much in the recent years. I mean, specifically since COVID, a lot of people, like you, like even you open your eyes up, and people work in the education system too. I hear people say that they wouldn't homeschool because, kind of like how we talked before, like they lose themselves, or maybe they have the career that they wanted and it's outside of the home, so they physically cannot homeschool. Or there's this idea that, well, if we can't afford to homeschool, which, I mean, I would have thought that as well. And I'm curious to kind of expand a little bit more, because you had mentioned that you needed to find stuff for yourself. And then now you have this business that you've created. You have your podcast as well. How have you been able to create a job and a lifestyle where both you kind of talked about your kids, so where you are flourishing?
It's been a journey. The very first year we homeschooled, I let all business pursuits go. They went to the side. So I focused just on making sure that I was not losing myself in homeschooling. I knew homeschooling and taking that on was going to be a big project, because I'm very type A, and I wanted to have all the curriculum and all the things and all the schedules. I've been able, as we've gone on, to grow in my confidence of not needing all of that as much. And so what's ended up happening is I've built a business that kind of fits around our homeschool. And so the two, they almost kind of are intertwined in a way that is hard to take apart. Like, I was the other day with my youngest. He was going around with me to do some business tasks that I had. My older ones are interested in making bumpers for YouTube videos and helping me out in that way. And so there's so much that they can learn that overlaps with what I'm doing for both my husband and myself, that, again, something I never would have predicted happening was I actually have more time and energy to work in my business now than I did when the kids were in public school. And it sounds counterintuitive, but it's partly because we create our schedule. And so I'm not getting up and rushing them out the door and then coming home and feeling exhausted because that didn't go well, because we couldn't find the shoes and I yelled and everyone was tired and it was a nightmare. And then just watching the clock tick until I have to pick them up, and know that when I pick them up, then it's going to be just like this total restraint collapse, and they're going to be tired, and then it's going to be like, it was so stressful doing all that. I didn't realize how stressful. I was worried I wouldn't have the patience to homeschool, but it turns out I didn't have the patience to public school. And when we got home and we started really getting our feet under us and figuring out homeschooling, it opened up a whole new world for me as far as energy and time to be able to work on my business. And so I tell moms all the time, you can absolutely have a business and homeschool. And it's great for your kids to see you doing that, to take part in that. I think that the world that they're growing up in, all of this is important. All of these skills, entrepreneurship, podcasting, speaking, writing, all these things that I'm doing, there is so much crossover, and there's so many ways that they can be involved, and they get excited too, and they want to do their own business, and they want to make their own movies and have their own podcast, and it just becomes this is going to sound crazy, but it becomes like this just big family thing where school and business are kind of just going like this, and it's really cool to see, and school doesn't take that long, so as we go through and as the big boys especially are taking over more of their own learning, I have the little guy for maybe an hour and a half in total that is like school, sitting down, doing grammar, math, whatever. And so the rest of that time is we're having lunch together, I'm working on my business, we're doing things outside the home, and it's just so much easier.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love too that you're incorporating the kids with what you're doing, and then they're learning so many skills, entrepreneurial skills, video skills, editing skills, and the list goes on. Wait, let me see with our time. I'll save that question. I go ahead and share. I'd love to share your business, what it is that you're doing, and that if somebody is needing something that with what you provide, that they could, and then talk more about your podcast too.
Yeah. So when I started homeschooling, I was excited, but I was super overwhelmed. And what I was looking for did not exist. And that was somebody to help me with the practical stuff, choosing curriculum, setting up a schedule, setting up my homeschool space, but also the mindset stuff. So how to not lose yourself, how to maintain boundaries, not yelling, to be able to feel calm and confident in this space. And so that's why I do what I do now. I equip moms who are just starting or even just thinking about homeschooling to begin with that confidence. And I do that through coaching and the community that you mentioned over on Instagram that's growing exponentially every day, which I just absolutely love. There's so many great moms in there that are helping each other. It's incredible. And then my podcast, and that's where I offer the support, again, that I wish I'd had. So in every episode, I try to include the practical, but also the emotional, and tackle just, one small piece of something that moms are trying to do when they're setting up homeschooling, or that I was trying to work through. I often reference my old journal entries. I wrote so many journal entries going through this process because I kept saying, if I ever figure this out, I want to remember how I did it exactly step by step so that I can help other people. So I use a lot of my journal entries. I have a lot of videos from back in the day that I took in the pickup line waiting to get the kids that I use as well. And so I always say homeschooling doesn't have to be hard, and it's my job and I feel like my calling to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you do, you really do a great job at it. And I love the resources that you provide with everything. And I think, if anyone is questioning, and, definitely check out Sarah's podcast and her page as well. I want to end with my final question. So, the podcast our episode today is kind of slightly different. The whole goal for me in this show is to share with women that regardless of your age or a season in life, that you can do those things that you want to do and chase those dreams. And you may not even realize it's a dream until it actually happens. And it doesn't have to be huge or grand or anything. It can be small as well. And what I liked in your story is that you had 20 years experience in education that looked vastly different. And then there was this shift to say, wait a second, we need to change things up. So you like we said, you and your husband decided to stop and you decided to homeschool. And this identity shift changed. And I don't know what age you were when this happened, but graduated plus 20 years, we can kind of do the math with that. Mm-hmm. But we are proud of our age no matter what. And so there was this identity shift and this change. And then there's also this, to kind of make it all work together, there's this fear for people with education. What do they do for their children? And then this fear of, am I losing myself? And then also you said, okay, I'm going to do these things that I want to do because I need to have things I enjoy and show my children that you can do that. And I'm going to start this business. And that's scary too, of where do I even begin? How do we even do that? And so I'd love to hear if you could encourage that one woman who feels blocked to pursue whatever dream or a goal that she has, or pulling the plug on schooling. I know that's kind of a little bit different, but if you could really encourage a woman who does feel blocked to pursue a dream or goal based on her age or life circumstance, what would you say to her?
So many things. First, I would say you're not late. I often struggle with feeling like I'm late. I missed it. And you're not late. And you're not too old. And you're not behind. I think I would encourage her to imagine all the detours and all the experiences are actually the thing that's going to make her story more powerful. It's going to be the thing that magnetizes whatever she's doing. Because I look back and I see and I'm like, oh, that led to that, led to that, led to that. And I wouldn't be able to do this now if I hadn't done that then. It wouldn't be as powerful. It wouldn't be as magnetic. It wouldn't be as interesting. And so I would say the world needs what you have right now, not a younger, flashier version of you. That version of me would not be able to do what I'm doing now. And I would also say what I tell my kids all the time, and that is your direction matters more than your speed. And like so are you taking the steps because you don't really have control over the speed of how fast something goes and what ends up happening on the other side of your efforts, but you're making sure you're going in the right direction? That absolutely matters. And as long as your direction is the right direction, that matters so much more than your speed. And so I would say start small, start scared. You won't have all the answers and it won't be perfect, but just start.
Sarah, can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
You're semi at the beginning of your business and your podcast as well. And I'm curious to know, because people always hear, they've made it. They're where they're at. But you're you're in the beginning of the process of everything. What is something that's scary for you while you're at this specific season that you're telling yourself? Like, what are you telling yourself when it's scary or hard?
That's a really good question. So a couple of things. One is, as I'm having this exponential growth, and it's a lot faster at times than I had anticipated it being, is that I am safe at this level of success. So I think when you get to next levels of success, you're being perceived more. You're being perceived by more people. You're being perceived more often, and that can feel really vulnerable and exposed. And so just continuing to tell myself that I am safe at this level of perception, that I know what to do at this level of success, that the answers will come, that I just have to keep putting the next foot forward. And knowing that people don't want perfection. People aren't looking for, a perfect Instagram story where I always have makeup on or my potatoes are washed in my reels. They are looking for the same thing that we are looking for, which is vulnerability. They're looking for authenticity. They're looking for messy, because we're all messy. Like, we all have our stuff. We all have things that are going sideways or not the way we want. And that messiness is where the realness is. That's where the real connection is. That's where I feel like I can actually serve people, is when we're being real and we're talking, and it's messy, because that's my life. And I feel like the more people know your heart, the more they trust you, and the more you can build and have relationship and community and traction and growth, is being able to be that thing that I'm most seeking out in other people, which is real and mess and vulnerability and authenticity. So that's kind of what I remind myself as I'm going through this season, but it can absolutely feel scary, and it can feel very vulnerable. And that's another reason why it's good to have people like yourself that you can talk to, and friends that are in it as well, that you can text or bounce ideas off of, or meet IRL and be able to go through these things together, because growing a business is definitely a roller coaster, and there's a lot of ups and downs.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, Sarah, for sharing that, because it's hard when you want to start something for people. It's hard. And then when you see somebody else that you're like, oh my gosh, they're so much further, or, whatever that may be, to have someone say, hey, no, this is, I'm at the beginning, or I'm at this point. Like, it may look like, just because it's being filmed, it may look like it's all together, but here's the raw, here's the messy, and here's the success. And so I'm excited just to see what happens with your business, with your podcast, with your page, everything. It's like I've already shared, it's very informative. People can check out your podcast, the Homeschool Hug, and I will put your website also in the show notes. And if there is anything else you want to share, Sarah, if you want to share your website or where people can find you on the socials.
Yeah, you can find me mostly on Instagram at Sarah Wehkamp, SarahWehkamp, and then my website's of the same name.
Perfect. And that'll be in the show notes. Well, Sarah Wehkamp, thank you so much for taking your time today and joining me on the More Than Your Age podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.